though, has not been under review yet. So we'll see what happens, because there are a few dynamic caveats here. Because if you take a loose body of sand and blow it, you'll get, based on the wind direction and intensities, you'll get different dune morphologies. And I'm saying we're not getting dune morphologies until the 19th century in sand sheets. But as due to the fact that there's always vegetation upon the sand sheets, and that constricted the development of dune morphologies. So we have a case here, and I assume it will pass. Spatially wise, again, we have, this is the coast here, the beach buildup, then sand moved in, okay? And the dune field extent reached more or less its close to full extent by 1,000 years ago in post-Byzantine times. In the 19th century, with the dunes, the 19th century dune formation, these are dune crest. The sand dunes moved a bit more easterly, and that's also been found by works of Noam Levine. The 19th century dune movement was only 100 to 300 meters advanced to the east. That's what I'm showing here. So this is a bit thinner than what we show here. So also the diversion of wadis was probably, there's been discussion about the wadis were not diverted by this sand mobilization. The wadis were controlled by previous Eolite ridges. And today we're having the dune field stabilizing and the transformation of transverse and linear dunes into parabolic dunes, as I mentioned at the beginning. I hope we're putting a few things together here.
Hello everyone. I'm happy to introduce our speaker, Dr. Roskin. Yoel is senior lecturer at the School of Sciences at Ahava Academic College, Israel, and the postdoc and research associate at the Department of Maritime Civilizations and Marine Geosciences at our Charney School of Marine Geosciences, and the Leon Recanati Institute of Maritime Studies at the University of Haifa. Yoel completed his master's at the Department of Geology and Mineralogy, Ben Gurion University of Negev, working on classification and evolution of recent open fractures along the western Dead Sea Reef margin, and his PhD at the Department of Geography and Environmental Development at the Ben Gurion University of Negev, working on the tiny and environmental significance of the late Quaternary dune incursion into the northwestern Negev desert, Israel. And his main research interests are aeolian geomorphology, geoarchaeology, and military geosciences. Please.
Okay. Hi, thank you. Good afternoon already. Again, my name is Joel Roskin, and we'll talk today about sand and dunes along the coastal plain of Israel. So before we major mode between 125 to 150 microns, so there's also a distinct grain size for dune mobilization. Now we'll get to the talk. So we're going to talk about how did the coastal dunes and sand of the Israeli coast develop in the Holocene. And the source of the sand, as we know, is the Nile littoral cell, which should make things a bit more easy. Not necessarily. So we're going to actually summarize here. Let's go to the acknowledgments first. Excuse me. A 3-year study that I've done, supervised by Revital and Dorit, and with the help of Gilad Steinberg and Nomi Porat, who I saw on the first slide, and the help of a lot of people here. I didn't mention everybody, so excuse me if I forgot somebody. People who help you in the field, in laboratories, and people that also provided information, as we'll see along the way. So we're going to talk about these dune fields along the coast of Israel, and I take advantage of this situation here to make a point here that there's 2 sand bodies near the southeastern Mediterranean coast, or in Israel and Sinai. One is what we're going to talk about, and 2 is a late Pleistocene Sinai Negev sand sea that extends from the eastern delta into the north central Negev. Both come from a Nilotic source. Have any of you studied dunes before? Okay. Okay, so now we'll sort of fill in. So we have the famous longitudinal dunes, which are very common, like in the Sinai Negev area, in inland dune fields, not in coastal dune fields. We have a few of these dunes also in the coastal dune fields. But the main type of dune is the transverse dune, which develops and transgresses inland with the main direction of the sand transporting winds. And the dunes have a steep face on their northeastern side along the coast of Israel. These dunes have been transformed into these type of dunes, parabolic dunes, in the last century due to vegetation of the dunes, which constricts power and transforms the morphology of the dune from a transverse shape to like a pin shape, to a U-shaped dune. But this is the initial form of dunes as been observed in the 20th century. We also have another type of a dune called a foredune, which is a dune which runs parallel to the shoreline and defines the end of the beach. And this foredune is understood to be a different type of dune, as these dunes move with the wind. This dune does not move with the wind. It rather accumulates sand by its vegetation cover, stays at its place, and stops sand transport from the beach into the inland. So if we have a foredune, we won't see, we probably won't going to show some actually new photos of sand sheets taken in the southern coastal area. This is by Ashdod, and this is by Zikim, north of the Gaza Strip. And what's interesting here for you guys, we see here we're here within the floodplain of Nahal Shikma. Here we have a decimated Kurkar Edenite ridge, and here we have at the lower parts we have red Pariasol Hamra overlaid by two thin sand sheets. We see a redder sand sheet, and we see a lighter colored sand sheet. Okay, this is the redder or browner one, this one, and we have the overlying thin sand sheet here. This is the red. Oh, here we go again. This is the red. This is the red Hamra here. So we don't see many dunes here, but what's very interesting is that within the sand sheets, what do we see here? What's that? We won't see in sand. We really won't see stones because we have accumulation of sand. We don't have enough transport power to mobilize stones or rocks. Pottery. We have pottery. The whole area from Zikim through Zikim hasn't been thoroughly mapped. Every place that there is an exposure, pottery has been found within these sand sheets, dating to Byzantine times. So we're getting, and we'll see soon, we're getting a basal sand sheet upon a red paliosol, which you can see now already. Upon the red or brown Hamra paliosol, which I mentioned before, we have two sand units. This is, I think Wirtzman exemplified this in the 90s. He talked about a lower Tarucha unit, which is browner, and an upper Hadera unit, which is lighter. And it kind of resembles what I showed you before on the sand sheet slide. And a few radiocarbon dates on shells gave a range of about 6,000 to 4,000 years for the Tarucha, while in the Hadera they were found to cover mainly in the south-central coast Byzantine sites, so an age of younger than 1.4 thousand years was given to the upper sand. But again, there wasn't much systematic studies with regard. We have many different studies that each one took his liberty or her liberty to give a different data and explanation. And this shows the importance of the study here that tries to lasot seder, tries to make order in these questions. So Tzor, which is Israel's outstanding dune scientist, which last year won a career award by the International Association of Alien Research, he probably won another award this year by the Geological Society of America. He didn't study that much the coastal dunes, and he says, okay, they were formed within the last 1,000 years. due to extermination of natural vegetation. As we mentioned before, that's one of the controls. So the last 1,000 years, I don't know how I got the 1,000 years exactly, but that kind of fits what we said before of the Chadera, and at the top, an age of 200 years. That's from one section. And then we have this Vlun Valley, which is systematic in ages, which is about 2.3 to 3.8 thousand years, and we'll less discuss the Vlun Valley dune mechanism, which is a separate mechanism, which is very interesting. But if we look at the rest of the coast, we get some strange 10,000 ages using IR OSL, and then we get a range of 6 to around 4 using TL. We get 3.5 with OSL. This is what we saw before here. And we've seen IRSL Kadosh, and we'll see it later, or section of 6 to 4. So it seems that we do have a certain range of ages here, but then we have some outliers here. Again, nothing is systematic. So let's get now to our research after this short introduction. And so we decided to concentrate on 2 dune fields. One is the Caesarea dune field, which we'll present, and then we thought about concentrating on a southern dune field like Nitzanim, but there we kind of, I don't know, we tired out, but we did a less intensive campaign. But altogether, we have quite a bit of results. So a lot of field work here with hand drills and exposed sections. I'll think about 40 sections and drills, the whole study. GPS measurements, and some basic laboratory of particle size, calcium carbonate, and of course, the main contribution here at the laboratory, sand was buried and was not transferred afterwards. In order to pick that up, the question is, again, where do we sample? And if we looked at the dunes, as we mentioned before, that are active, we won't be able to pick up a good age which represents the construction of the dune field. So what do we have to do? We have to get down to the base of the sand dunes and find the lowest sand, which overlies earlier substrates, and that can give us the age when sand was deposited there and did not move there onwards. So what happened is that in this study, we mainly dated sand sheets, the lower parts of the section. Let's move on here. And here we look at the quality of the ages before you move on, because it's very important. That, when we take a sand sample, about a fist-size sample, in the laboratory we clean the sample, and then we measure these small tiny coin-size or penny-sized discs, smaller, like 5 millimeter discs, upon which we put about a few hundred grains of sand. And what we want to find is a normal distribution of the dose, which is the measure of the signal, which represents we have a good estimation of the signal and the age of the sand, which is very. And since we take a bulk sample, we expect to find a normal distribution, which is very interesting. That sometimes we find in outliers, which is really weird because everything has been done very uniform. This is constant. That's where we have to check other variables. But if we do look at this, again, this estimation of the change of the sand flux along the coast, we can see along the hinge here, along Gaza, we have a change in the amount of sand which is being deposited from, that's around 650,000 to 250,000 in this range here. So we do see a lot of sand is being deposited in this region here. So we would expect to find in this region here, we have more sand. Okay, by definition, so we can expect maybe to find higher dunes or deeper penetration of dune fields. What's going on here? And then we'll get to the results. Look at the dune field patterns with regard to the previous slide, a bit about stratigraphy and sedimentology, and then the age of the beaches, then the case study, and then the full coast compilation. After so I mapped the general spatial attributes of the different dune fields. But we can see actually in the south by Gaza, we don't see more inland transport of sand. We don't even see higher dunes, despite the change of sand deposition along the alongshore current, littoral sand. We do see a deeper penetration of quaternary aluninites. We don't see a change here. But we do see that along the whole southern coast, south of Tel Aviv, we're getting more sheet of several meters thick, and several parts we have dunes which attain, let's say, 10 meters or so. And we'll get back to that at the end. Particle size distribution was done by Niv and Emery in 1960 along the beach. Here we took samples from the sand sheets and the dunes. We don't see any strong trend of fining from north to south, which was cautiously presented in the past. It's here more or less the same. And again, the main point here for sand transport, all of the modes fall between 100 to 250 microns, meaning all the sand is prone for normal aeolian sand transports. We don't see the grain size isn't an important factor along the coast in controlling sand transport. Also, calcium carbonate is in this general range of 5 to 15%. Okay, now we'll get to the beach. Beach ages. Okay, so we have the beach ages of Kadosh based on the IRSL. We went back to the beach. If you recall, Donnie, and we drilled. We took an OSL age at the base of the sand. It came out the same age as the IRSL age. Here, 5,000 years, and this is 5.1 thousand years. The base of the sand. Okay, that gives us a general age of the beach construction. And again, we see also a couple of meters up, we also see a similar age of 4.8. So we're seeing rapid beach sand construction around 5,000 years. Also by Tel Nami, not far from Tel Dor, we have the PhD of Solomon, which also with cross-bedding of sand, meaning that sand accumulated along the on both sides of the aqueduct when it was active till around the 5th century or so. But again, that's very nice. But the aqueduct, it marks the edge of the beach. It doesn't answer the question about the whole construction of the dune fields. So why do we choose Caesarea had the dune field? Okay, we have a lot of nice reasons here. To make things short, it's close to the university here. But this is all correct also. Don't worry. So just for an example, let's look at one section. Here we have the transverse dunes, which comprise the central part of the dune field. Should have shown the map before. And we have a transverse dune, as I mentioned before. We didn't date the dune here because it's been mapped by Noam Levine to be still active. So we went to the lower part of the sand sheet, which underlies the dune. We dug in. We dug in here at the interdune, and we got an age of 4.3 thousand years, which reminds us of what age? The beach age. So the beach was about 6 to 4,000 years. So the lower part of the age, and the center part of the dune field, is similar to the beach age. So that means the beach was constructed, and additional sand probably blew in. But again, we're talking about 1 or 2 meters of sand altogether. The dunes were later. We also look by Olga at Kappas dunes. These are dunes without not much of a morphology. We look into the dune, and we get when a person arrives near to the outskirts of Caesarea, he saw a lot of white sand, which was unique at that time, and that's why it was mentioned several times in the Talmud, and only concerning Caesarea. So if we take the ages we saw before, the cluster of the 1,000 year and the modern cluster, if we look at the development of Caesarea from a small town during Greek times, through Roman times when it reached its peak, and also into Byzantine times, we see a tremendous amount of human impact within the city and probably along its outskirts. And as the town declined during the early Muslim period, we probably experienced a gradual stabilization of the sand due to regrowth of vegetation that was destroyed by all the different historic needs of people at this time. Okay? And following the Crusader time, the sand was probably very stable. And this is the opposite of what we saw before, when the explanations were saying that sand began, or dunes began 1,000 years ago due to destruction of vegetation. Here we're seeing at Roman times there was destruction, and there was regeneration of vegetation at this time. We don't have distinct proof, but we have the OSL ages. And then we have, again, a second round of sand mobilization during pre-modern times in the 19th century. The amount of samples we have. Years of the pottery, overlying paleosoil of 12,000 years. We have another dune, this dune here, a transverse dune. Again, we can see within the dune it's 50 years. The base of the dune is 150 years. And we have another transverse dune, which the base is 60 years. That's the, where's the picture? That's not here. I didn't show the picture here. So we're getting, again, similar ages as we saw in Caesarea, the 50 years, the 150 or 120 years. And what is different here, though, is the 2,000 years, and that's that red-brown sand sheet which we did not find in Caesarea, which is 2,000 years. If we go further south to Zikim, we see a similar pattern. We see the paleosoil at 9,000 years. We see, again, the red-brown sand sheet of 1,300 and not 2,000. Again, Roman Byzantine times, and again, pottery here, and the upper sand of 100 years. So we're getting a similar pattern in the north, but a bit different because we have the addition of this sand sheet. Also, in Yavne, we have an agro-ecosystem of berms, which date again to about 1,100 years based on pottery. And then we also dated the sand, not the sand of the dune again, the sand beneath here. And again, we got 1,100 years. I didn't put it here on the slide. We're getting also here 1,100 years, similar to what we found in Caesarea. So we're getting similar ages, but altogether we can summarize a few stratigraphies. This is the stratigraphy we saw in the south with the sand. 1,000 years, a lot of sand being deposited, a distinct gap from post-Crusader time to the 19th century. Also here a gap I forgot to mention at the end of the sea level rise. You have a gap here. Gaps are just as important as the inclines. And here we have to zoom in and see what happened in the 19th century. So here we zoom in and see we have. It's hard. I would cluster here an age around 120 to 180, and also around 50 years. It's hard to see in this diagram, but for sure we have from 50 years ago we have the modern stabilization of the coastal dunes of Israel, and again the distinct gap between 180 years to 600 years ago. These may be outliers. Let's not get into this. Time-wise, where am I? Up to 2. Okay, fine. Okay. Here are a few more ages to save OSL time. We drilled the edges of the dune fields of Ashdod. This is south, and excuse me, Nitzanim. This is south, and Ashdod. We drilled the edge. This is right by the big canyon, the big mall of Ashdod. And here we drilled not far from the main coastal road. And here we took sections with the portable OSL reeds. This is a depth. Here we got a depth and a signal section. Finally, okay. And these are the photon reads of the portable OSL reader. But what's interesting, we're getting lost or transported inland since around 5,000 years ago, following beach buildup and inland sand transport. The rest was deposited along the shelf or in Haifa Bay. So that means altogether we're talking, in a way, we can say, in a very general way, we're talking about 500 full years of littoral transport contributed sand to the inland of Israel. Now, how can we fit it with paleoclimate? Let's make things easy. We can. Let's take some works of Daphne Lang based on pollen in the Dead Sea. And she shows a very high resolution change between humid and dry conditions in the Dead Sea, which in general is also controlled by Mediterranean circulation. And if we take her figure and turn it around and put it along the ages here, we can see during the time of the beach and inland sand sheet incursion, we're getting many changes in climates. Again, wind transport, which is important here. Climate, wetter or drier, does not make much of a difference. theoretically also on sand transport. So that doesn't really fit. We can't use climate. Let's take another study, which was from scientific reports, I think of Nature. There's Balloon Valley. If we look at some very nice looking proxies of human impact, we have a strong human impact beginning around 3,000 years ago. About 1,000 years ago,